one of the things I wanted to do is provide context for how and why each book was written. Because if you look at these Bond continuation novels, there's so many different ones, and they all take such different approaches. I mean, beyond the Young Bond novels and the Moneypenny uh, spin-off series, which are both excellent, or Kim Sherwood's Double O trilogy.
Mm.
They're all very different. The Bensons are more like Bond films in that they have big set pieces. There are some that try to hew closer to Fleming's approach. Uh, but so I wanted to put every series in context, every author's book in context, not only their whole period of writing, but how each book was informed by the last book and what was going on in terms of publishing or Bond fandom, or just what were the marching orders from Ian Fleming Publications, IFP.
So on
So,
that, oh no, go
yeah,
please
please.
go for it.
No, no, go. No, on it.
Well, I was going to hit upon the IFP and whether they give the authors some steer or some vetting, and do they
Okay.
vet like every other chapter, or do they just get the subject and the plot and go, looks good,
Okay.
I'll green stamp
Yeah.
that?
Remind me about IFP, and I'll just do the
Yeah,
second part of
yeah,
this other
sure,
thing.
please.
Uh, clang, clang, clang went the trolleys. My brain clicking into to whatever gobbledygook I was saying. Oh, Sebastian Fox. So when so Raymond Benson wrote his six novels, three novelizations and assorted short stories, and then they took a pause, and then they did the Young Bond and the Moneypenny series, and then it came time for Fleming Centennial, and to commemorate that, they engaged Sebastian Fox to write a Bond novel in the style of Fleming. That's the only time that they've consciously or deliberately asked an author to
Mm.
try to come close to reproducing Fleming's style. So, as part of his, own fun way of approaching it, he did try to, keep to the writing routine of Fleming. So that answers that question. Okay.
Great,
Now you asked another question, was how does IFP work with the authors?
please.
And this is one of the most essential elements of my questions and the book, and it really takes an entire book to answer. But let me try to distill some of it. They work with different authors differently, all of whom have to submit a sense of what their story is and where it's going. How much they have to submit and how detailed that those submissions are, or how long those submissions are, vary as you read, will vary greatly from author to author. But the IFP is not going into this blindly. They're not simply saying, "Hi, author X, we love your work. Write a Bond book and send it to us,
Mm.
and when it's done, we'll publish it." They are involved in the vetting of the author, in the in giving notes on the process, and one of the things that they do per uh, Fleming's widow is they will all have to vote on the manuscript at the end and see if it passes muster. If it doesn't, it doesn't get published. If they approve it, it does get published.
Man talk.
One of the things that they do per uh, Fleming's widow is they will all have to vote on the manuscript at the end and see if it passes muster. If it doesn't, it doesn't get published. If they approve it, it does get published. Having said that, it's not as scary as, and one time with the Jenkins per fine ounce in the 60s, they declined to have it published. Uh,
Which one's that?
However,
Sorry.
it's called Per Fine Ounce, and Jeffrey Jenkins was an author who said that he had Fleming's support to write this Bond novel, and then after Fleming passed, he said, "Well, Fleming gave me the permission, support, and encouragement to write it. I'm writing it. I'm going to publish it. And they said, well, we'll buy the rights for it, but we reserve the right not to publish it if we don't like it. He turned in the manuscript, and they elected not to publish it.
Wow. Where's that now? Has that ever seen the light of day?
No, I mean
Oh,
there's a certain number of pages that exist, but it's nominal. It doesn't tell you much. So
God.
that's also one of the holy
Cons-
grails for Bonds. Fans wouldn't it be cool if they found that?
Yeah, there's a couple of holy grails out there. I know Black Daffodil is probably one of the biggest holy grails, right? You heard of Black Daffodil? So Ian Fleming got into writing poetry at some stage in his life and wrote a whole bunch of poems, had a whole manuscript put together and called it Black Daffodil. But then got very self-conscious about it and apparently just trashed every
Oh, that's
copy,
terrible.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but it's believed there could be still some out there because, things crop up all the time in people's attics and he well, anyway, I'm just going by what I learned from
They
the
put out
Nicholas
an
Shakespeare
excellent
book, right?
yeah, they put out a excellent
Ingenious!
So, do you consider the John Pearson book the authorized biography of James Bond? Do you put that in the same canon as continuation novels?
well, yes and no. The no part is I per it's a fully quote unquote authorized novel. It wasn't fan fiction. But yet, having said that, like the time travel boy short stories, I don't consider it as part of the official Bond's life events that he would have then you know retired, and then M would have asked him to tell his life to a biographer. Um, so, however, the stories within his book are really interesting and great fun. And he does fill in the gaps between the novels and has a different point of view sometimes on the events of the novels themselves. And so I think it's a really fun book. But I remember when I first got it in Grand Central or right by Grand Central at a bookstore, being very confused about how it fit in because it wasn't written by Fleming, and I didn't really quite understand that. And so
Mm,
part of these books is to understand the conditions in which these stories are written. However, the yes part is when I wrote the other book, James Bond After Fleming, I did not separate that book. I did not separate the Adventures 003 and a half. I didn't separate that book from the rest of the canon. I didn't separate the novelizations. It's there's no appendix for that stuff.
mm.
It's given as much weight as any of the other books because I don't think that I mean fans should make those determinations what's important to them, what's important not. But in terms of examining it from a analytical point of view, let's give everything equal weight and then see what we got.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really like that book. For me, it has the
Yeah.
vibes of like a Young Guns 2 film where you have like an old Emilio Estevez telling the story as Billy the Kid, and then people are kind of unsure of the authenticity. And I think of all of the continuation books, I'm going to put it in that canon. It's the one that could get realized by a film the most because you could have an old Pierce Brosnan, like he is, what is he, 70 now? He could be in the retirement home telling someone his biographer. And then as soon as, CGI is good enough, we'll then get a young Pierce Brosnan flashbacking. And you get the best of both worlds. You get the young Bond, you get Bond in his prime, and you get the Bond in the retirement home.
Well, I mean, if you look at, to your point, when you look at the Charlie Higson Young Bond novels, Higson himself says, I don't think that these are exactly the events that young Bond went through as written by Fleming. He says young Bond probably had a very ordinary life, and I tend to
Mm,
agree with him on that.
mm.
But you've got this idea, have Charlie Higson write a whole bunch of young Bond novels. Sure, why not? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
He's got the chops.
yeah,
Well,
go with it, and then go with the premise.